Good morning and welcome back to another webinar in our series of Pulling Back the Curtain. Today we're going to discuss the Home Improvement Consumer Protection Act, which is designed to protect consumers from deceptive and unfair conduct by contractors. If you've got any questions, just type them in the chat box and I will try and answer as we go along, or if I can't get them all answered as we go along, we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. I'm going to share my screen with you, my PowerPoint, and you should be able to see it right now. So again, pulling back the curtain series, we have these typically weekly, except for weeks where we have a radio show. And we discuss topics of real estate and elder law, powers of attorney, how to protect your costs, your money from the cost of long-term care. Again, there's real estate and other webinars. If you've got a particular webinar or topic you would like us to discuss, please email me. We'll give you my email at the end, but it's keith@keitheliou.com, and we'll try and put together a presentation to answer your questions. Again, today is Know Your Rights Before You Hire a Home Contractor. A little bit about me. I've been in real estate and elder law estate planning business for over 3 decades. I've been a member of the local multi-list for over 22 years. I own a mortgage company. Advocate Mortgage. We've done hundreds of millions of dollars in mortgages over the decades. I've conducted personally hundreds of closings and issued thousands of title policies. So I know the business from the very beginning to the end. If you're selling or you're buying, we can save you thousands of dollars in closing costs. We've got special programs that will save you, again, thousands in closing costs. So call us or email me about the programs. I'm also a certified financial planner and registered investment advisor. So I can help you whether you're selling or buying from the beginning to the end. If you're entering into a nursing home, you want to call us. Even if you're in a nursing home or you've got a loved one in a nursing home, we can protect assets. It's not too late. The overall focus of the act we're going to discuss today, it's consumer driven, primarily for residential homes, not commercial properties. Designed to stop deceptive or unfair acts by contractors, and it's not primarily addressing bad work by a contractor, negligent work, but it does require $50,000 in liability and property damage coverage be obtained by a contractor. So that's important to note. If you've got a claim, there's a source of payment. The contractors need to have at least $50,000 in the contract. If they give you a contract to sign, it's got to say how much they've got, but it's got to be at least $50,000. Again, protects consumers, not businesses. It's for their private home. It can be a condo or a 2-unit property. It does not cover a 3 or 4 unit or multiple more units, like an apartment building. Would not cover that type of property. So that's the type of property not covered. What type of contractors are not covered? Contractors who did less than $5,000 of work last year are not covered by this act. And retailers, big box stores that have over $50 million in net worth, provided that they have certain letters of credit on file with the state, at least $100,000 per store with a $2 million maximum. They're not covered by this act. If they meet that, if they have problems and there are claims, they can lose that exemption. Okay, so what actions are not covered under the act? We talked about who isn't covered, what properties aren't covered, what actions aren't covered. Work under $500 isn't covered. You don't get protected under this act. If you're building a new home, if it's commercial or business property, landscaping is not covered under this act unless the landscaper is building retaining walls, fountains, drainage systems, concrete driveways, and patios. So depending on what if the landscaper is doing more than mulching and cutting grass, if they're starting to build retaining walls, they are covered under this act, and they need to have the required insurance and follow the rules. There's certain emergency work. So if you need to have emergency work that's exempt from the unfair trade practices and consumer protection law, That's not covered under this act. If you're converting a commercial property to a residential property or more than 2 units, those actions are not covered under this act. You don't get afforded the protections of this Home Improvement Consumer Protection Act in those cases. Now, what is prohibited under the act? Okay? If you hire a contractor to sign a contract and they don't do substantial work within 45 days of the start date of the contract, send them a letter, certified mail, and then from the date they either receive it or decline it, they have to give you your refund within 10 days. If not, it's a violation of the act. And there's some real teeth to the remedies in this act. We're going to talk about that at the end, but these are things that a contractor cannot do. If a contractor tries to get paid for work that isn't done, and they do that by giving you something that looks like an official document, a certificate of occupancy, and they know it's not true, violation of the act. If they just stop work and disappear, obviously, that's unfair and deceptive, and that's a violation of the act, unless they stop work because you didn't pay them. Then they can stop work. Here's something that's akin to negligence, to bad work. They materially change the plan of work to be done without your consent, or they fail to perform any part of the project. So they don't do what they said they were going to do, or they don't do some of the project. And it doesn't really say negligent, but this is pretty close to that. Violation of the act. If they inflate the price of your job so that you can obtain financing, the bank or financial institution says they'll lend you 75% of the cost of whatever the job is. And so they inflate the price by 25% on the papers. So it looks like you put 25% down, and you never did. So they're trying to get you 100% financing. That's a violation of the act. That's unfair and deceptive. What else is prohibited? No kidding. Bait and switch tactics. They tell you, give you a price, and then once they do the work, or while they're doing the work, they want to charge you more. That's a violation of the act. Or if they want you to pay them up front before you even sign a contract, that's a violation of the act. They can't do that. Down payments. How much can they collect? If the job's for more than $5,000, the most that the contractor can collect is 1/3 of the price of the contract, plus the cost of any special materials, except for certain retailers. Again, retailers who have certain letters of credit can collect more because they have letters of credit on file as another source for payment of problems with the job. If the contractor changes their name or address in a deceptive manner, they start the job and then they tell you, well, our new name is something other than what they originally started with, or they change their address, that can be deceptive and a violation of the act. Now, beyond deceptive, what's fraudulent? Because this act prohibits deceptive conduct and fraudulent conduct. So these things are considered to be fraudulent. If the contractor lies to you to induce you to sign a contract, or they, again, increase the price once they start the job, that's fraudulent. If they collect money up front and they don't do the work or refund the money, fraudulent. Lies about their name, it damages your property so they can fix it. They come in and you don't have a problem, they break something, and then they tell you it's broken, so you have to hire them to fix it. That's fraudulent. That's a fraudulent act. If they represent themselves to be part of the government in order to get you to hire them, fraudulent acts. If they say something that's a special order items are more expensive. So they tell you, well, this is a special order item and it's more expensive, and it's really not a special order item, that's fraudulent, and it's prohibited under the act. If they change the contract without your consent, they add something to the contract that wasn't there without you signing it, without a change order, fraudulent. Or if they put out any false or deceptive advertisement, all of that is prohibited by this act. Now, they give you a contract to sign. What has to be in the contract to hold you liable? You'd be surprised how many contractors don't have contracts on which you can really be held liable if they're not doing a good job and they tell you have to pay them because of what's in the contract. If the contract doesn't have these provisions, it can't be enforced against you. However, you will have to pay for any direct benefit that you receive. So you can't just say, well, I'm not going to pay for any of the job, but you didn't have this in the contract, that in the contract. You're going to have to pay for any benefit that you receive. But what has to be in the contract? Got to be in writing. Got to be able to read it. It can't be blurry or smudged out so that there are provisions in there that you can't read. It's got to have each contractor has to have a registration number from the state. So their registration number's got to be on the contract. You both have to sign it, or your agents. So the contractor sign it, you have to sign it, or somebody can sign on your behalf, the contractor's behalf. A statement that says it contains the entire agreement, and it's got to be dated. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but be surprised how many contracts don't have these provisions. What else? Has to have the contractor's name, address, and phone number, not a P.O. box. P.O. boxes don't work. It has to have a start date and completion date. Lots of contracts we see don't have either. There's a description of work, no start date, no ending date. That's not enforceable against you. It has to describe, the contract has to describe the work, the materials, and specifies that it can't be changed without a change order. So they got to lay out what work's going to be done, what materials are going to use. They have to say, okay, this won't change unless you sign a valid change order, and it's got to have the total sales price. It's got to give you a number. If you hire a contractor on what's called a time and materials basis, where you agree to pay whatever the times, whatever the materials cost, plus a profit to the contractor. So whatever the cost of the time of their workers and the materials they use, and a profit, then there's special provisions that have to be in the contract. For example, one of the items that has to be that whatever the time materials cost is, that can't increase more than 10%. That's a cap. It can change, but it can't change by more than 10%. And the contract has to have, with time and materials, how much you're putting down and what the cost of the special order items are. And those two items have to be listed separately. If they're using subcontractors, they need to give you the names, addresses, and phone numbers of the subcontractors. And P.O. boxes, again, aren't acceptable. Remember, I said earlier that they've got to have insurance. The contractors have to have insurance if they're covered under this act, and at least $50,000 of liability and property damage. And they have to state in the contract, if they've got more, how much they have. The contract has to list a toll-free number for the Consumer Protection Bureau, so that if you think they've done something wrong, you have a place to call in the government to get some help from a contractor that's behaving badly. And they've got to give you 3 days to change your mind. The contract has to have a 3-day right of rescission. So if you sign a contract, you have the right to change your mind within 3 days, or the contract is not valid. And they have to give you a copy of the contract. There's an exception for emergency work. Again, if there's something that needs to be done and really can't wait 3 days, there is an exception if the work is part of an emergency. Arbitration clauses. These are not your friend. An arbitration clause prevents you from filing a lawsuit with the courts. And so it takes away your rights. If a contract has this, it's got to be in a certain form and contain certain language, or it's unenforceable. What has to be? This is where you go to a third party that decides your claim, and it can be binding or it could be appealable. It's got to state whether or not it is. But this takes away the teeth of acts like this that have rewards that can triple your damage. Get 3 times whatever damage is back from the court, and the other side has to pay your attorney fee. So this law is very consumer friendly, but these clauses will attempt to limit your right. So what's got to be in if you see one of these things, what should you look for? Got to be in capital letters, got to be bold. Has to be on a separate page from the rest of the contract. Can't be buried in the middle of the contract. It's got to be on a separate page, have a separate line for you to sign and the contractor sign and date. Again, the arbitration clause should say whether or not it's binding or appealable. Most of them are binding. It's the whole point. They don't want you to go to court. And it's got to state whether or not the facts in dispute and the documents and the decision are confidential. If it does not contain all of those items, it may not be enforceable. You may be able to go directly to court. More clauses to make the contract voidable by you. So if it contains any of these, you agree to hold the contractor harmless from liability. Voidable by you. You don't. You can tell the contractor you're not going to adhere to the contract because it contains any of these. If it makes you waive building code requirements, if there's a confession of judgment clause where the contractor can get a judgment against you, voidable contract is voidable by you. If it makes you waive your right to a jury trial, or waive claims or defenses by you, if it awards attorney fees or costs to the contractor, you can void the contract. If it requires you to waive contractor liability for acts in collection of payments, or waive any of your rights under this act, or contains an automatic removal of certain provisions, unless you can opt out, again, those types of clauses, if you see those, the contract is not enforceable against you. Remedies, what happens? So you engage a contractor that engages one of these bad acts, primarily, for example, doesn't do the work according to the plan that was supposed to be done. Well, they can have criminal liability. There are some acts are felonies, some acts are misdemeanors. Depends on the amount involved, what exactly was done. Also, if you're over 60 years old, that's that will make the offense worse, and the contractor can lose your license or at least have it suspended. So that's the criminal side. But what's in it for you? Civil remedies. You're going to get your damages, whatever your actual damages are under this act. You can get that back ×3. The act permits the court to award treble damages, big hammer for bad contractors, and attorney fees. So the court can award you whatever the attorney fees are that you incur. So these are very big penalties, civil remedies for you against the home improvement contractor. Again, a retailer, if they follow the act, they're not really covered under this, but you can always call the Bureau of Consumer Protection. For example, if there's an arbitration clause in the contract, try the government, because they may be able to help you get a remedy. Thank you for attending. If you've got any questions, I don't see any right now, but if you do have any questions, or think of anything, or have ideas for other topics you'd like to hear about, email me at keith@keitheliou.com, or call me. My direct line is 412-921-7100 extension 13. And thank you very much for attending, and hope to see you at our next webinar next week, which will cover the Home Inspection Act. If you're buying a home, what should you know about the Pennsylvania Home Inspection Act? Thank you. Hope to hear from you.